My husband and daughter shut me out for a month, so I chose to leave. 5 years later, he called and asked me to attend our daughter's wedding. I went not knowing what to expect. When he saw me there, his hands began to shake, and I finally understood the power of walking away. "Dad, did you hear something? Like weird white noise." I stood frozen in my own living room, hands still extended toward the TV remote, while my 17-year-old daughter looked right through me and asked her father if he'd heard a noise. Not asked me a question. Just about me. Like I was a malfunctioning appliance. Spencer didn't even glance up from his phone. "Just the house settling, honey. The house settling." That's what I'd become after 20 years of marriage. Not Catherine. Not Mom. Not even an annoyance worth acknowledging. Just ambient noise. Background static. The creaking of old pipes nobody notices anymore. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here and listening to stories about finding strength in impossible situations. If you believe that no one deserves to be erased from their own life, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. Now let's see what happens next. That was day 28 of what I'd started calling the erasure. 28 consecutive days of being treated like I didn't exist in my own home. 28 mornings of cheerful greetings met with theatrical silence. 28 evenings of coming home to find them already eating takeout they hadn't bothered to save for me. I'd actually started checking mirrors that week. Touching walls to confirm I could still interact with physical objects. I'd Googled, "Can you be dead and not know it?" at 2 a.m. 3 nights ago, which tells you everything about my mental state. The remote sat on the coffee table between them, just 18 inches from where I stood. Lily snatched it away the moment I reached for it, clutching it against her chest like I was trying to steal something precious. "We're watching something," she said, not looking at me. "I just need 5 minutes, I heard myself say, hating how my voice had taken on this pleading quality. "Just to check the news." 5 minutes. Lily's eyes stayed fixed on the television screen where some reality show couple was having a scripted argument. "We're at the good part." The good part. There was always a good part. Every single time I wanted to use the TV I'd helped pay for in the house I'd helped maintain, there was always some critical moment I'd be interrupting. I stood there another moment, my arms still outstretched stupidly before letting it drop to my side. Spencer and Lily had already returned their attention to the screen, their bodies angled slightly away from me, creating a united front. A wall I couldn't penetrate. I walked back to the kitchen, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors I'd scrubbed last weekend. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink. The dishes from breakfast I hadn't been invited to because they'd gone out for pancakes. Without mentioning it. Without asking if I wanted to come. I'd found the receipt on the counter when I came downstairs at 8:30. 2 orders of blueberry pancakes, 2 orange juices, 2 coffees. The timestamp read 7:15 a.m. They'd deliberately left early to avoid me. This wasn't new. The pattern had been building for weeks. Each incident small enough to dismiss individually but together forming something impossible to ignore. It started subtly, conversations that would halt the moment I entered a room. Inside jokes I wasn't included in. Plans made without consulting me. Then it escalated. The morning greetings I offered that went completely unacknowledged. Spencer raising his newspaper the second I spoke, creating a physical barrier between us. Lily's eyes sliding past me like I was transparent, even when I stood directly in front of her asking about her day. I tried to rationalize it at first. Spencer was stressed about work. Lily was a teenager and teenagers were naturally self-absorbed. They were going through something, having some father-daughter bonding phase that would pass. But this wasn't bonding. This was exclusion. Systematic, deliberate exclusion. I opened the refrigerator looking for something to make for dinner and found it nearly empty. The groceries I'd bought 3 days ago were gone. In their place were takeout containers and convenience foods I hadn't purchased. They'd been eating without me, shopping without me, living without me. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my friend Janet. "Still on for coffee tomorrow?" I stared at the message, trying to remember when I'd made those plans. Yesterday? Last week? Time had started blurring together, each day identical to the last. Wake up. Try to be seen. Phil. Go to bed. Repeat. I typed back. Yes, 10 a.m. at Riverside Cafe? Her response came immediately. Perfect. Can't wait to catch up. Haven't seen you in forever. Forever. Had it been that long? I scrolled through our message history. 6 weeks since our last coffee date. 6 weeks since I'd left the house for anything other than my part-time shifts at the university library. 6 weeks since I'd done anything that wasn't trying to make my family acknowledge my existence. When had I become this person? This desperate, invisible woman haunting her own life? I closed the refrigerator and noticed something on the counter I hadn't seen before. Spencer's briefcase positioned by the back door, ready for tomorrow morning. But it was Saturday. Spencer never packed his briefcase on Saturday for Monday. He was meticulous about his routines. Briefcase got packed Sunday evening, never before. Something cold prickled at the base of my spine. I walked over, telling myself I was just curious, not snooping. The leather was expensive, well-maintained, exactly like Spencer himself. Professional. Organized. Efficient. A corner of paper stuck out from the side pocket. Legal letterhead. My hand moved before my brain could stop it, pulling the document free. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Read the header in official typeface. The paper trembled in my hands, or maybe my hands were trembling. I couldn't tell anymore. My eyes scanned down the page, catching phrases that rearranged my entire reality. Irreconcilable differences. Equitable distribution of assets. Custody arrangements. Custody arrangements. For Lily, who was 17 and didn't need custody arrangements. Unless Spencer was making sure I'd have minimal access even to weekend visits. Making sure the erasure would be legally permanent. I flipped to the next page. Asset division. Our house. The one we'd bought together, decorated together, where I'd planted every flower in the garden. Listed as marital property to be retained by petitioner. Spencer. The house would go to Spencer. Our joint bank accounts, the ones I'd been managing for 20 years, would be divided. Our savings split down the middle. My retirement account from the library, categorized and calculated. Everything we'd built together, neatly itemized and divided like we were a business partnership being dissolved. Not a marriage. Not a family. Not 2 decades of shared life. I turned to the final page. The signature line. Spencer had already signed. His name in that precise, efficient handwriting I'd once found attractive. Dated 3 days ago. Thursday. The same day I'd suggested lunch at the sushi restaurant. The same day he'd walked past me like I was air. He'd already decided. Already signed the papers. Already ended our marriage. The last month hadn't been them going through a phase or dealing with stress. It had been them waiting for me to break, waiting for me to leave, making conditions so unbearable that I'd do exactly what Spencer wanted without him having to be the bad guy. A sticky note was attached to the signature line. 3 words in Spencer's handwriting. Sign here. Not, I'm sorry this didn't work out. Not, we need to talk. Not even, I want a divorce. Just instructions. Like I was an employee being terminated, handed papers and told where to sign. I stood in my kitchen. The kitchen I'd cleaned that morning in the house I'd maintained, beside the family I'd devoted 20 years to, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. Not breaking. Hardening. I wasn't going to sign these papers. Not tonight. Not like this. I folded the document carefully and slid it back into Spencer's briefcase exactly where I'd found it. Then I walked upstairs to our bedroom, pulled my old college duffel bag from the closet and began packing. 3 comfortable shirts. 2 pairs of jeans. Enough underwear and socks to last a week. My toothbrush. My laptop. The framed photo of baby Lily I kept on my nightstand, not because I was taking it with me long term, but because I needed to remember her before she learned to look through me. I left a note on my pillow. Short, simple, giving them nothing. Gone to think. Don't worry about me. Hey. Then I walked down the stairs, past the living room where Spencer and Lily were still watching television, neither of them glancing up as I passed. I opened the front door, stepped into the cool night air and closed it quietly behind me. They didn't notice. They wouldn't notice for hours, maybe not until morning. Maybe not until they needed something from me. By then I'd be gone. Not because they'd won, but because I'd finally understood. You can't make people see you. You can only choose to stop being invisible. I drove to the train station and bought a ticket north to my hometown, to my parents' house where I'd grown up. The next train left at 3:30 a.m. I had 4 hours to wait. I didn't cry. I didn't call Spencer. I didn't text Lily. I sat on a metal bench in the fluorescent-lit station and felt for the first time in 30 days like I could breathe. The train pulled into Millbrook Station at 6:47 a.m., just as weak sunrise was bleeding through gray clouds. I'd spent the 4-hour ride staring out the window at darkness, watching my reflection in the glass. A ghost woman with hollow eyes and a duffel bag, running from a life that had already finished running from her. My father's house sat 3 blocks from the station, the same 2-story colonial where I'd grown up, where my bedroom walls still probably had thumbtack holes from teenage posters. I walked slowly, my bag feeling heavier with each step, not from its contents but from what it represented. 43 years old and moving back home like a college dropout. The porch light was on. Dad's habit never turned off until full daylight. I stood at the door for a solid minute before ringing the bell, rehearsing explanations that all sounded equally pathetic. My father answered in his ancient terry cloth bathrobe, the blue one Mom had been threatening to throw away for a decade. His hair stuck up at angles that defied physics, and he squinted at me through glasses he'd clearly just shoved on his face. "Catherine." His voice was rough with sleep and confusion. "What in God's name are you doing here at this hour?" I held up my duffel bag. It was all the answer I could manage without my voice breaking. Come in, come in." He stepped aside, ushering me into the living room that hadn't changed since 1995. Same floral couch Mom had reupholstered twice. Same family photos on the mantel. Same safe, unchanging space where the worst thing that ever happened was a broken lamp or a bad report card. "Harold." Mom's voice drifted down from upstairs, alert despite the early hour. Retired school principals never really lost the ability to wake at the first sign of something wrong. "Who's at the door at this ungodly hour?" "It's Catherine, Eleanor. He's visiting." Pause. A long one. I could practically hear Mom's brain cataloging the implications. Catherine unannounced at dawn with luggage. "I'll be right down." Dad guided me to the couch, took my bag, set it by the stairs. "I'll make coffee," he said, which was his default response to any crisis. "Heart attack. Coffee. Car accident. Coffee. Daughter showing up fleeing her marriage. Coffee." I sat on that floral couch and felt something inside me finally unlock. My hands were shaking. Not from cold or fear but from the simple fact that someone had opened a door for me. Someone had said my name and looked directly at me while saying it. "They've been pretending I don't exist," I said when Dad returned from the kitchen, not bothering with preamble. "Spencer and Lily. For a month. Like I'm furniture. My voice cracked. Like I'm the house settling." Dad's face did something I'd rarely seen. It cycled through confusion, then understanding, then quiet, dangerous fury. The kind of anger that doesn't explode but burns steady and hot. He'd been a civil engineer for 40 years, a man who solved problems with math and logic, but in that moment he looked like he wanted to solve Spencer with his fists. "How long?" he asked. 30 days. I counted. He nodded slowly, processing. "And you left." I found divorce papers. He'd already signed them. Just left them for me to find with a sticky note telling me where to sign. "That son of a..." He stopped himself, glanced toward the stairs where Mom's footsteps were approaching. "That's not how you end 20 years. Apparently it is." Mom appeared in the doorway wearing her quilted robe, her gray hair in the braid she'd slept in for as long as I could remember. She looked at me, then at Dad, then back to me, and I watched her retired principal assessment skills kick in. "I'll make breakfast," she said. "Catherine, you look half-starved." "Harold, set the table." That was Mom. Crisis management through routine and food. 20 minutes later, I sat at their kitchen table. The same table where I'd done homework and eaten family dinners and announced I was marrying Spencer 20 years ago. Mom set down a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, and homemade scones that she must have baked yesterday. She poured coffee, sat down across from me, and delivered her assessment with the same unflinching honesty she'd used on struggling students for 4 decades. "You've been disappearing for years, haven't you? Not just this month." I opened my mouth to protest, to defend myself, but she held up one hand. "Your Christmas cards used to be full of stories, Catherine. Little anecdotes about Lily, funny things Spencer said, your thoughts on books you'd read. The last few years they've been generic grocery store messages with just signatures. Your voice on our phone calls has sounded flat, mechanical. You stopped mentioning your own needs or interests. Everything was always Spencer thinks or Lily wants." Each observation landed like a small stone, building into something I couldn't ignore. You turned yourself into wallpaper, honey. Mom's voice softened but didn't lose its edge. And wallpaper eventually gets painted over. The truth of it stung worse than any accusation. He was right. I'd been slowly erasing myself for years, making myself smaller and quieter and more convenient, thinking that's what good wives and mothers did. By the time Spencer and Lily started actively ignoring me, I'd already done most of the work for them. I don't want you signing those divorce papers, Mom continued. Not yet. Not until you figure out what you actually want, not what Spencer wants from you. And you're staying here at least 3 months. No rushing into decisions from a place of pain. Mom, I can't stay here for 3 months. I have a job. You have a part-time library position that will understand you taking personal leave. What else do you have, Catherine? Really? I stared at my eggs, unable to answer. What did I have? A house I'd be lucky to keep half of. A daughter who called me white noise. A husband who'd rather I didn't exist. 3 months, Mom repeated firmly. Promise me. Okay, I whispered. 3 months. Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For the first time in months, I was somewhere people actually saw me. Even if the scene came with uncomfortable truths. The next evening, I was helping Mom organize her garden shed when a car pulled into the driveway. I didn't recognize the silver Honda until my younger brother Marcus climbed out, carrying bags of Chinese takeout. Mom called you, I said, not bothering to make it a question. Mom called me, he confirmed, walking over and pulling me into a hug that smelled like chalk dust and acrylic paint. Drove 4 hours. You're welcome. Marcus was 38, taught high school art, and had gone through his own divorce 3 years ago. We sat on the back porch with containers of fried rice and lo mein, the spring evening cooling around us. Want to hear about my marriage? Marcus asked, stabbing at his food with chopsticks. Not particularly. Too bad. You need to hear this. He set down his container and looked at me directly. My ex-wife spent 5 years making me feel like my teaching job wasn't real work. Like I was playing with crayons while she had an actual career. My hobbies were childish. My friends were immature. My interests were a waste of time. I kept shrinking myself, trying to be what she wanted, avoiding conflict. By the end, there was nothing left to shrink. I recognized the pattern immediately. You know what I learned? Marcus continued. The person who makes you feel invisible is showing you exactly how much they value you. Believe them. Don't waste time trying to prove your worth to someone who's already decided you don't have any. So I should just give up on my marriage? I'm saying maybe you're not running away from your marriage. Maybe you're running toward yourself. He pulled out a small notebook, the kind he used for sketching, and drew a simple timeline. Who was Catherine before she met Spencer? What did she like? What made her laugh? What were her dreams? I stared at the blank timeline, realizing I couldn't remember. That version of Catherine had dissolved so completely I couldn't even recall her outline. 3 months, Marcus said. Mom told me her terms. Use that time to find her again. The Catherine before. See if she's someone worth being. After Marcus left, I went up to my childhood bedroom. Mom had turned it into a guest room, but my old bookshelf still stood in the corner, filled with novels I'd loved at 16, 17, 18. Books I'd read before Spencer, before Lily, before I became someone whose existence was negotiable. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent. It had been silent for 7 days now. No calls from Spencer asking where I was. No texts from Lily checking if I was okay. Nothing. Part of me had expected anger, furious messages demanding I come home and stop being dramatic. Part of me had hoped for worry, concerned calls asking if I was safe. Instead, silence. They genuinely didn't care that I'd left. Or worse, they were relieved. I cycled through emotions faster than I could name them. Rage at their indifference. Grief over my failed marriage. Shame that I'd let myself become so diminished. Fear about an uncertain future where I didn't know who I was supposed to be. That night, I woke at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding, convinced I'd made a catastrophic mistake. I should go back. I should apologize. I should sign those papers and accept whatever scraps of relationship they'd allow me. Then I remembered Spencer walking past me like I was furniture. Lily asking if he'd heard white noise. The empty refrigerator they'd left that way deliberately. Each memory hardened something in my chest, transforming grief into resolve. By the end of that first week something shifted. I woke Saturday morning at 9:30, the latest I'd slept in years, without an alarm, without guilt, without anyone needing anything from me. I made coffee at my own pace. I sat in Mom's garden with a novel I'd been meaning to read for months. For 3 uninterrupted hours I read. Just read. Because I wanted to. It was such a small thing. But it felt like remembering how to breathe. That simple act, 3 hours of uninterrupted reading, became my anchor point. Every morning that followed, I'd wake without an alarm, make coffee at my own pace, and sit in Mom's garden with whatever book I'd chosen. No one needed me. No one was waiting for me to perform invisible labor. No one was timing how long I took for myself. It should have felt selfish. Instead, it felt like remembering I was human. 3 weeks into my stay, Dad asked if I'd update my resume on his computer. Just in case you want to look for something full-time, he said carefully, not pushing, just offering the option. I sat at his desk in the study that still smelled like his old pipe tobacco, even though he'd quit smoking a decade ago. The desktop computer was ancient by modern standards, but it worked. I opened a browser to access my email for reference materials. That's when I saw it. My old email account was still logged in from some previous visit months ago. The inbox showed unread messages, most of them spam, but one subject line made my hand freeze on the mouse. Following up on our discussion about Lily's college applications and the special circumstances you mentioned. The sender was Jennifer Carlson, Lily's school counselor. Special circumstances? What special circumstances? I shouldn't have opened it. I knew that even as my cursor moved toward the email. This was technically snooping, reading correspondence not meant for me. But the phrase special circumstances regarding my own daughter overrode every privacy instinct I had. I clicked. The email was a response in a longer thread. I scrolled to the beginning, my heart rate accelerating with each message. 6 months ago, Spencer had initiated contact with Ms. Carlson. The first email was innocuous. Questions about Lily's college application timeline, scholarship opportunities, standard parent concerns. But the second email shifted everything. I wanted to discuss some family circumstances that may affect Lily's applications, Spencer had written. My wife has been dealing with some personal challenges, mental health issues that have made her increasingly unreliable. I'm trying to provide stability for Lily during her senior year, but Catherine's condition has been affecting the household. Mental health issues. Increasingly unreliable. Catherine's condition. My hands started shaking. The thread continued. Spencer had methodically built a narrative over months, each email adding another layer. Catherine was struggling with depression, having difficulty maintaining normal routines, becoming emotionally distant from family responsibilities. He positioned himself as the heroic parent holding everything together, managing both his demanding career and Lily's needs while his wife fell apart. Ms. Carlson's responses were sympathetic, supportive. She praised Spencer's dedication. She suggested resources for families dealing with mental illness. She assured him that Lily's college applications could note the challenging family circumstances to explain any inconsistencies in her academic record. I kept scrolling, each message making me feel sicker. There was no challenging family circumstance. There was no mental breakdown. There was just Spencer systematically destroying my reputation to school officials, creating a paper trail that painted me as unstable, unreliable, essentially abandoning my parental duties. And he'd started this 6 months ago, 2 months before the erasure even began. This wasn't reactive cruelty. This was premeditated. I printed every email, my hands trembling so badly I could barely load paper into the printer. Then I did something I hadn't done since leaving. I logged into our joint bank account. I'd been managing our finances for 20 years. I knew every account number, every password, every automatic payment. I'd handled it all while working part-time at the library, somehow making Spencer's corporate salary and my modest income stretch to cover mortgage, bills, Lily's expenses, everything. The login screen appeared. I typed the password, expecting it to fail. Surely Spencer had changed it after I left. But it worked. He hadn't even bothered to lock me out. Why would he? I was already gone. The account summary loaded and my stomach dropped. The balance was $3,847. 3 months ago it had been $31,000. I pulled up the transaction history, watching our savings evaporate in a pattern of transfers. Small amounts at first, $200 to an account I didn't recognize. Then $500. Then $1,000. The transfers escalated over 8 months, always to the same external account, S. Whitmore Personal Banking. Spencer had opened a separate account in only his name and had been systematically moving our joint money into it. I calculated quickly. Over 8 months he'd transferred nearly $28,000. The photographer for Lily's birthday party, $300, paid from joint funds 1 week before a $3,000 transfer to his personal account. The expensive dinners I was never invited to, all paid from our joint money, then equivalent amounts moved to his private account days later. He'd been deliberately depleting our shared resources while building his own separate financial cushion, ensuring that when I left I'd have almost nothing. The timeline was damning. The money transfers started 8 months ago. The emails to Lily's counselor started 6 months ago. The systematic ignoring campaign started 4 months ago. The divorce papers appeared 3 weeks ago. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a marriage falling apart. This was planned demolition. My phone rang, making me jump. Patricia's name appeared on the screen. My supervisor from the university library. Catherine. Her voice was careful, uncomfortable. I need to tell you something and I really hope you won't shoot the messenger. What's wrong? Spencer called the library yesterday. He said you were experiencing some personal difficulties and needed extended leave for health reasons. Patricia paused. He implied, without saying it directly, that you were having some kind of breakdown. He even suggested that we might want to consider your position unstable for long-term planning. The room tilted slightly. He what? I thought it was strange. You've worked here for 12 years, Catherine. You've never missed a deadline, never called in sick without good reason, never given me any indication of instability. So I'm calling to verify. Are you okay? Is there something I should know? I'm fine, Patricia. I'm more than fine. My voice was steadier than I felt. Spencer and I are separated. I'm staying with my parents while I figure things out. But I'm not having a breakdown and I fully intend to return to work when I'm ready. That's what I thought. Patricia's tone shifted, becoming more direct. Catherine, I've seen this before. My sister went through something similar. Her ex-husband tried to destroy her professionally before their divorce, building a case that she was unreliable so he could argue for full custody and reduced alimony. I wanted you to know what Spencer's doing because this feels like someone building a case for something. After we hung up, I sat staring at the computer screen, at the printed emails, at the bank statements spread across Dad's desk. Pieces were clicking together into a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Spencer had been planning my exit for at least 8 months, possibly longer. He'd been moving money, crafting a narrative of my instability, poisoning my relationship with Lily, contacting my workplace to damage my professional reputation. Then he'd created conditions so intolerable at home that I'd leave, giving him the final piece he needed, evidence of abandonment. If this went to court, what would it look like? A mother who'd left her family without warning. A mother with no money because she'd been too unstable to notice her husband draining their accounts. A mother whose own daughter's school counselor had documented her mental health challenges and unreliability. A mother whose employer had been warned she might be too unstable for continued employment. Spencer would win everything. The house, full custody of Lily despite her being nearly 18, minimal alimony because I was employable, but had abandoned my family. And I'd be left with nothing. No credibility, no money, no relationship with my daughter, no professional reputation. I heard the back door open. Marcus had come for his daily visit, another bag of takeout in hand. He found me in the study, surrounded by evidence of my husband's systematic destruction of my life. Cat, you okay? He set down the food and came closer, seeing my face. What happened? I showed him everything. The emails. The bank transfers. Patricia's call. I watched my brother's expression shift from concern to anger to cold calculation. Marcus had always been the artistic one, the dreamer, the one who taught teenagers about color theory and perspective. But right now his brain was working like an engineer, organizing information into patterns. He pulled out a notebook and started creating a timeline, writing dates and events in his neat teacher's handwriting. 8 months ago, money transfers begin, he wrote. 6 months ago, emails to school counselor start. 4 months ago, Systematic ignoring campaign begins. 3 weeks ago, divorce papers appear. He drew lines connecting the events, then looked up at me. This isn't spontaneous cruelty, Kat. This is calculated destruction. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. Marcus tapped his pen on the timeline. He was creating conditions so intolerable that you'd leave. Then he'd have evidence of abandonment, plus a narrative that you're unstable. In any custody or financial dispute, he'd win easily. I'd thought Spencer was cruel. I'd thought he'd fallen out of love and handled it badly. I'd thought the ignoring campaign was about him being selfish or emotionally stunted. But this was something else entirely. This was a man dismantling his wife's entire life with corporate efficiency, ensuring she'd leave with nothing. No credibility, no money, no relationship with her daughter, no reputation. Building a case, brick by brick, that would justify taking everything while making it look like I'd abandoned them. What do? I asked Marcus, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on my artistic, gentle younger brother's face. It was the look of someone who'd been through his own demolition and survived. You don't sign those papers. You document everything. You build your own case. And you get a lawyer who specializes in cases like this. Because Spencer just made a critical mistake. What mistake? He assumed you'd never figure it out. He assumed you'd stay broken. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. He forgot that invisible women see everything. Marcus's words hung in the air between us. He forgot that invisible women see everything. I looked down at the evidence spread across Dad's desk. Printed emails, bank statements, Patricia's warning scribbled on notepaper. 8 months of systematic destruction, documented and undeniable. I'm not signing those papers, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke it aloud. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. Good. What else? I'm not responding to Spencer at all. No explanations, no confrontations, nothing. The plan was forming as I articulated it, each piece clicking into place with startling clarity. He thinks I'm broken. He thinks I ran away to fall apart somewhere. Let him keep thinking that. You're going underground, Marcus said, understanding immediately. Healing while he gets comfortable. Exactly. I started gathering the documents into a folder. Comfortable people make mistakes. I need him to believe he's already won. That night, I opened a new bank account at a local credit union, one with no connection to our old bank. I transferred the modest balance from my personal account. Money from my library paychecks that Spencer hadn't managed to access. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Dad appeared in the doorway of the study, reading glasses perched on his nose. You're documenting everything? Everything, I confirmed. He sat down at the desk, pulling the bank statements toward him with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent 40 years making numbers tell stories. Let me show you something. For the next hour, my father, retired accountant, crossword puzzle enthusiast, man who'd taught me to balance a checkbook at age 12, walked me through exactly how much Spencer had taken and how to protect what little remained. He was smart about it, Dad admitted grudgingly. Small transfers, irregular timing, nothing that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. But he made one critical error. What? He left a pattern. Courts don't like patterns. They suggest intent. Dad created a spreadsheet, organizing every transfer by date and amount. We'll need copies of everything. Statements, emails, documentation of his contacts with the school and your employer. Build a timeline that shows premeditation. Mom joined us with tea in her old principal's network. I called Margaret Chin. She retired from Lincoln High 3 years ago, but she was there for 35 years. She remembers you from when you volunteered in Lily's elementary classes. Mom set down the tea with quiet determination. She's writing a character reference. So are Beth Garrison and Tom Fletcher. All people who knew you as a parent, as a volunteer, as someone reliable and present. I looked at my parents. Both in their 70s, both supposed to be enjoying retirement, both now weaponizing their professional expertise to help their daughter survive a predator in a business suit. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank us, Mom said firmly. You're our daughter. We protect our own. 6 weeks after I'd arrived with nothing but a duffel bag and shattered dignity, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer. Spencer had been calling from blocked numbers occasionally, leaving voicemails I deleted without listening to. But something made me pick up. Catherine Whitmore? The voice was professional, female, warm. Speaking. This is Dr. Rebecca Walsh. I'm the director of the Riverside Library System. Patricia Brennan gave me your contact information. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I moved to the back porch away from where Mom was making dinner. Of course. Patricia spoke highly of your work. 12 years at the university library, your cataloging system overhaul, your outreach programs. I'm impressed. Papers rustled on her end. We have an opening for a senior research librarian. Better title than your current position, better salary, full benefits. The job is yours if you want it. I gripped the phone tighter. Just like that. Not quite. Rebecca's voice shifted, becoming more personal. Patricia told me a bit about your situation. I went through something similar 5 years ago. Husband who tried to destroy my career during our divorce, made me look unstable and unreliable. I know what it looks like when someone's being professionally sabotaged. I see. You're too good at your job to let him take that from you, Catherine. This is a fresh start in a city where his narrative hasn't reached. Where you can rebuild without fighting his version of events at every turn. She paused. The position starts in 3 weeks. That enough time to relocate? 3 weeks. Enough time to find an apartment, pack what little I owned, leave behind the town where I'd been Mrs. Spencer Whitmore for 20 years. Yes, I said. That's plenty of time. Excellent. I'll email you the formal offer. Welcome to Riverside, Catherine. After we hung up, I sat on the porch steps, watching the sun set over Mom's garden. For the first time since finding those divorce papers, I felt something other than pain or anger or fear. I felt hope. 2 months into my strategic silence, Lily finally called. Not my parents' landline, not Dad's cell. My personal phone, the number she'd always had. I stared at her name on the screen for 3 rings before answering. Mom. Her voice was different than I remembered. Sharper. More entitled. Where are you? I'm safe, Lily. I'm fine. Dad says you're having some kind of breakdown. That you just left without. I'm not having a breakdown. Kept my voice level, calm. I left because I was being treated like I didn't exist in my own home. There's a difference. That's not. Mom, I need you to come back. I have to submit college applications and I need your signature on financial aid forms. This is important. Not, I miss you. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry for how we treated you. I need your signature. Then I heard it, Spencer's voice in the background, muffled but distinct. Tell her she's being selfish. Tell her she's ruining your future. My daughter wasn't calling on her own. She was reading from a script. Something hardened in my chest, transforming the last soft places into something more durable. Lily, I said quietly, I'm not having a breakdown. I'm having a breakthrough. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about why I left, one where your father isn't coaching you, call me back. Mom, wait. I hung up. My hands were shaking but my resolve was solid steel. Marcus appeared in the doorway. He'd been staying for dinner, had obviously overheard. He crossed the room and squeezed my shoulder. That was perfect, he said. Don't let them pull you back into that dynamic. She didn't even ask if I was okay. I know. His voice was gentle but firm. Because she's been told you're not. She's been fed a narrative for months, Kat. It'll take time for her to question it. If she ever does. If she ever does, Marcus agreed. But you can't sacrifice yourself on the altar of maybe. You gave her 20 years. Now you give yourself a chance. 3 weeks later, I stood in my new apartment in Riverside Meadows. 1 bedroom, functional kitchen, living room with windows that let in afternoon sun. The furniture was second-hand but clean. The dishes were mismatched but mine. The space was small but entirely my own. My first night there, I sat on my thrift store couch with Chinese takeout and realized something profound. I was content. Not happy yet, that would take time. But content in a way I hadn't been for years. Maybe decades. No one knew where I was except my parents and Marcus. No one could walk past me like I was furniture. No one could discuss me like I was a malfunctioning appliance. I found a yoga studio 3 blocks away, joined an evening class where the instructor had gray hair and laugh lines and called everyone dear. I discovered a book club at my new library that met Thursday evenings. I made friends with my neighbor Elena, a middle school teacher recovering from her own divorce, who invited me on morning walks through the neighborhood. My routine became my anchor. Wake without an alarm. Coffee at my own pace. Work where people valued my expertise. Evenings that belonged entirely to me. Weekends for farmers markets, hiking trails, documentary films at the independent cinema downtown. I learned I liked red wine better than white. That I preferred mystery novels to romance. That sleeping late on Sundays without guilt felt like luxury. Simple discoveries that should have happened decades ago. 3 months became 6. 6 became a year. The seasons changed and I changed with them. Not dramatically but steadily, like a plant finally getting enough light. I wasn't just surviving Spencer's demolition. I was discovering who Catherine had been before she became Mrs. Whitmore, before she learned to make herself small and quiet and convenient. I was finding the woman who'd laughed at spilled coffee at a conference. Who'd made ridiculous marketing slogans for impossible products. Who'd believed she deserved to take up space in the world. She'd been there all along, just buried under 20 years of systematic diminishment. Now she was emerging, and she was stronger than Spencer had ever imagined possible. Because he'd made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed erasing me would make me disappear. Instead, it had set me free. Freedom, I learned, wasn't a single moment of liberation. It was 5 years of small choices, each one building on the last until you looked back and barely recognized the person you'd been. Year 1 was survival. Learning to sleep alone without loneliness, to cook meals for one without feeling the absence of 2 empty chairs, to make decisions that affected only me. I enrolled in night classes at Riverside University, pursuing the master's degree in library science I'd abandoned when I married Spencer. He'd called it unnecessary back then, said my bachelor's degree was sufficient for part-time library work, implied that furthering my education was somehow selfish when we had a family to support. Turned out it wasn't unnecessary at all. I studied digital archiving systems, information management theory, emerging technologies in library science. The work was challenging in ways that had nothing to do with emotional survival and everything to do with intellectual engagement. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be challenged academically, to struggle with concepts that had clear answers if you worked hard enough to find them. My thesis examined digital preservation strategies for small community libraries. Practical, unglamorous, exactly the kind of work that mattered to real people. When it was published in the Journal of Library Administration in year 3, Dr. Walsh brought champagne to the office. "You're too good at this to stay in research," she told me over plastic cups of cheap Prosecco. "I'm promoting you to associate director. More pay, more responsibility, more visibility. You ready for that?" I was. Turns out I was good at leadership, at mentoring younger librarians, redesigning inefficient systems, advocating for budget increases. My colleagues sought my advice. They invited me to dinners, asked my opinion on their projects, genuinely seemed to enjoy my company. It was revolutionary, being valued for my expertise rather than my ability to disappear. Elena from next door introduced me to her book club in year 2. That's where I met Joyce, a real estate agent with a laugh like broken glass and opinions about everything, and Michelle, an ER nurse whose dark humor about her ex-husband's inadequacies made me snort wine through my nose. We started meeting monthly, just the 4 of us, calling ourselves the Phoenix Club with only mild irony. Women who'd risen from the ashes of failed marriages, scarred but stronger for it. "My ex told me I was too loud," Joyce said one evening, her 3rd glass of wine making her philosophical. "Spent 15 years trying to be quieter, smaller, less opinionated. You know what I learned?" "What?" Michelle asked. "I'm not too loud. He was too fragile." We all drank to that. I dated occasionally. Nothing serious, just reminding myself I was still a woman, still interesting to other humans. Daniel, a history professor, took me to art galleries and talked about the French Revolution like it was gossip. We lasted 3 months before mutually agreeing we were better as friends. Marcus, a librarian from the satellite branch, made me laugh but wanted commitment I wasn't ready to give. We ended things amicably over coffee. I wasn't looking for another relationship. I was learning to have one with myself first. Throughout all of it, I maintained absolute silence regarding Spencer and Lily. No calls, no emails, no late-night social media stalking to see what they were doing. I blocked them on everything, creating a digital firewall between my old life and new. This wasn't avoidance, it was strategy. My lawyer and Brennan had advised this approach from the beginning. and was 50-something, razor-sharp, with a reputation for demolishing opposing counsel while maintaining perfect professional courtesy. She wore sensible shoes and no-nonsense suits and had eyes that could calculate your financial worth in seconds. "Let him think he won," she told me during our first consultation. "Let him get comfortable in that narrative. Comfortable people make mistakes. Comfortable people get sloppy." So I let Spencer believe I'd simply dissolved, that his systematic erasure had succeeded. I paid the court-ordered child support every month without fail. $400 that legally I could have challenged since Lily was nearly 18 when I left, but I paid it anyway. Creating my own paper trail of reliability. Documenting my stability. And kept copies of everything. Bank statements showing steady income and responsible spending, employment records showing promotions and professional growth, character references from colleagues and neighbors. Building a case we might never need but would have ready if we did. My parents provided occasional updates about Lily. She'd chosen a college 3 hours from home, far enough for independence, close enough for weekend visits. Marketing major. Active in student organizations. Dating someone seriously by her sophomore year. Each update felt like a small knife between my ribs, but I maintained silence. I couldn't force Lily to see the truth. I could only ensure that if she was ready to hear my side, I'd still be here. Her 18th birthday passed without contact. I allowed myself one day of grief, looked through old photos, cried into Elena's shoulder, drank too much wine and woke with a headache that felt like punishment. Then I got up and kept moving forward. By year 3, something unexpected happened. I realized I liked my life. Not tolerated it. Not managed it. Actively liked it. I traveled to conferences in Chicago, San Francisco, Boston. Cities I'd always wanted to visit but never had time for when I was busy maintaining a household that didn't want me. I walked through museums alone, ate at restaurants alone, discovered I enjoyed my own company. I took a pottery class at the community center and was terrible at it. Every bowl I made looked vaguely drunk, listing to one side. But I loved the meditative quality of working with clay, the way you could smooth out imperfections with wet fingers. I experimented with cooking, trying recipes that only needed to please me. Discovered I loved Thai food spicy enough to make my eyes water. That I preferred documentaries to sitcoms. That sleeping late on Sundays without guilt felt like luxury I'd never known existed. I started keeping a journal, processing my marriage with increasing clarity. Reading back through entries from year 1 to year 3, I could track my own evolution. From broken woman questioning her worth to someone recognizing Spencer's systematic abuse for what it actually was. One entry from year 4 caught my attention. Spencer's cruelty saved my life. If he'd been merely neglectful, ordinarily unhappy, gradually distant, I would have stayed forever trying to fix things. But his calculated erasure was so extreme, so deliberate, that leaving became my only option for survival. He freed me by trying to destroy me. How's that for irony? I realized something profound that year. I didn't miss my marriage. I missed the idea of what I'd thought my marriage was supposed to be. The fantasy I'd constructed in my head that had never actually existed. The reality had been 20 years of slowly shrinking myself, making myself smaller and quieter and more convenient, until there was almost nothing left to shrink. Spencer hadn't suddenly become cruel. He'd always been this way. I'd just been too invested in the fantasy to see it clearly. Year 5 arrived quietly. I was 48, owned no property, had modest savings, a job I loved, friends who actually wanted to spend time with me. My life wasn't impressive by external standards. No fancy house, no impressive title, no Instagram-worthy highlights. But it was mine. Completely authentically mine. That Tuesday evening in late April, I was heating tomato soup and debating between the ocean documentary I'd been saving or mindless cooking competition shows when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Probably spam about extended car warranties or duct cleaning services. But something, instinct, curiosity, fate made me answer. "Hello, Catherine." Spencer's voice. After 5 years of silence, suddenly in my kitchen through this small rectangle of glass and circuits. Every muscle in my body went rigid. My first instinct was to hang up immediately, block the number, maintain the careful separation I'd built. But curiosity overrode self-protection. "I'm here," I managed, my hand gripping the counter edge. He sounded different. Older maybe. Uncertain in a way I'd never associated with Spencer Whitmore, who'd always known exactly what he wanted and how to get it. I I wasn't sure if this was still your number. It is. I didn't elaborate. Didn't tell him I'd kept it specifically hoping Lily might call someday. Didn't give him anything. Awkward pause. I heard background noise, voices, music, movement. He wasn't alone. How have you been? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. 5 years of systematic destruction, of silence, of treating me like I'd never existed, and now he wanted to know how I'd been? Fine, I said flatly. Why are you calling, Spencer? He took a breath, the kind people take before difficult announcements. Catherine, Lily is getting married. The words hit like physical impact. My little girl, not little anymore. 22 years old. Getting married to someone I'd never met, at a wedding I'd never be invited to, living a life I knew nothing about. Married, I repeated because my brain needed a moment to process. Yes. To a wonderful young man named James Morrison. They met in college, been together 2 years. The wedding is next month. Next month. She'd been engaged for who knows how long, planning this wedding, choosing flowers and venues and dresses, and I was learning about it through a phone call 5 weeks before the ceremony. I hope she's happy. She is. Catherine. His voice shifted, becoming more hesitant. You should come. To the wedding. I nearly dropped the phone. The audacity was breathtaking. 5 years of silence, of treating me like I'd never existed, and suddenly I was supposed to show up at my daughter's wedding like nothing had happened? You want me at the wedding? Yes. She's your daughter. You should be there. But as Spencer talked, explaining the date, the venue, the time, I detected something in his voice I hadn't anticipated. Something that sounded almost like fear. He was afraid of something. I couldn't identify what, but it was there, threaded through his words like a hairline crack in expensive porcelain. She misses you, he said quietly. I did laugh then. Couldn't help it. Funny way of showing it. 5 years, Spencer. Not a single call, text, or email. Not on my birthday, not on holidays, nothing. But now she misses me. People change, Catherine. Time changes things. Yes, I agreed. It certainly does. I should have said no. Should have told him exactly where he could put his wedding invitation. Should have hung up and blocked his number and continued my carefully constructed life without him. Instead, I heard myself say, I'll think about it. After he hung up, I stood in my kitchen with cold soup and a phone that felt heavier than it should, trying to understand what had just happened. My daughter was getting married. And somehow, impossibly, I just agreed to consider attending. I stared at my phone long after Spencer hung up. The screen dark and silent, my soup forgotten on the counter. My daughter was getting married. To someone named James Morrison. At Riverside Country Club. Next month. And I'd said I'd think about attending. The absurdity of it hit me all at once. 5 years of silence and suddenly I was supposed to show up at a wedding like nothing had happened? Like I hadn't been systematically erased from their lives? Like Spencer hadn't spent months building a case that I was unstable, unreliable, essentially abandoning my family? I needed perspective. I needed people who'd tell me the truth, not what I wanted to hear. I texted the Phoenix Club group chat. Emergency meeting. My place. Tomorrow night. Bring wine. Elena responded first. On it. Everything okay? Define okay, I typed back. The next evening, my small living room filled with the women who'd become my chosen family. Elena arrived with 2 bottles of red wine and concern etched on her face. Joyce brought fancy cheese and her trademark bluntness. Michelle showed up straight from a 12-hour shift, still in scrubs carrying chocolate. I told them everything. Spencer's call, the wedding invitation, the 5 years of silence suddenly broken for this. Why now? Elena asked immediately, her teacher's instinct for hidden motives kicking in. Why reach out after 5 years of nothing? What changed? Maybe Lily insisted, I offered weakly. Did Spencer say that? Joyce was already pouring wine with the efficiency of someone who'd had this conversation before. Because in my experience, people don't suddenly remember you exist unless you're useful to them. What do they need from you, Catherine? I hadn't thought about it that way. I don't know. My presence. My blessing. Your compliance, Michelle said quietly, her nurse's ability to see through symptoms to root causes serving her well. They want you to show up, play nice, fit into whatever narrative they've created about your absence. Make it look like everything's fine, like they're the gracious ones allowing you back in. The wine was sharp on my tongue, or maybe that was just the bitterness of recognition. But here's the real question, Michelle continued, leaning forward. What do you want, Catherine? Not what's right or fair or expected. Not what a good mother should want. What do you actually want? I set down my wine glass, trying to articulate something I'd been avoiding examining too closely. I want to see her, I admitted. I want to know if she ever thinks about me. If she remembers that I used to make her lunch with little notes. If she ever wonders what really happened 5 years ago. And, Joyce prompted. And I want Spencer to see me. The truth came out harder, sharper. I want him to see what he threw away. I want him to confront the woman he tried to erase, who rebuilt herself into something he doesn't recognize or control anymore. Elena smiled slowly. Now we're getting somewhere. That's not revenge, I said quickly. I'm not trying to ruin anything. It's not revenge, Michelle agreed. It's closure. And honestly, it's justice. He tried to destroy you. You showing up whole and thriving, that's the best response you could give him. We talked for 3 hours, working through scenarios, motivations, risks. By the time they left, I'd made my decision. I was going to the wedding. The next morning, I met Brennan at our usual coffee shop downtown. She arrived precisely on time, carrying her leather briefcase and wearing her trademark sensible heels. You're going, she said before I could speak, reading my face with the accuracy that made her such an effective lawyer. I'm going. And ordered a black coffee, sat down across from me with the posture of someone preparing for negotiation. Then we do this strategically. This is either a trap or an opportunity, maybe both. She pulled out a legal pad, started making notes as she talked. If you go armored. Treat it like a deposition. Speak only when necessary. Observe everything. Give them nothing. No anger, no tears, no explanations they can twist later. You're composed, dignified, present because you choose to be. I can do that. Also consider bringing someone. A date, a friend. Evidence that you've moved on, that you have a life they're not part of. Anne's pen tapped against her notepad. Men like Spencer can't stand the idea that you survived without them. Show him you didn't just survive. You flourished. That's more devastating than any revenge you could plan. I thought about it, then shook my head. No. This is something I need to do alone. Bringing someone would look like I'm trying too hard to prove something. Fair point. And made another note. There's also a legal angle to consider. Attending demonstrates your ongoing interest in Lily's life. Your stability. Your willingness to be the bigger person. If any custody or financial issues ever resurface. Lily's 22. There won't be custody issues. You'd be surprised what can come up in divorce modifications. Better to have this documented. That you made the effort, that you were willing to attend despite years of exclusion. And looked up from her notes. I'm not saying that's why you should go. But it doesn't hurt. I was beginning to see the wedding differently, not as a personal event that might bring closure, but as a strategic move in a game I hadn't realized we were still playing. 3 weeks. I had 3 weeks to prepare. I treated it like preparing for battle because in many ways that's exactly what it was. The dress took 2 days to find. Elegant but not extravagant, sophisticated but clearly affordable. Something that said, I'm doing well without screaming, I'm trying to impress you. Navy blue, simple cut, appropriate for a wedding without trying to compete with anyone. I got my hair cut and styled, not dramatically different, just refined. Professional. The stylist, a chatty woman named Carmen, asked if I was going somewhere special. My daughter's wedding, I said, and the words felt strange in my mouth. How wonderful. You must be so excited. I smiled noncommittally and changed the subject. At home I practiced in front of the mirror. Not what I'd wear or how I'd look, but what I'd say if forced into conversation. How have you been? Simple question, loaded implications. I've been well, thank you. Neutral gives nothing away. Where have you been? Slightly accusatory. I've been building a life for myself. And you? Turn it back, don't explain. Why did you leave? Direct confrontation. I left because I was being treated like I didn't exist. I chose to exist elsewhere. Truth without anger. I ran through scenario after scenario. Lily confronting me at the reception. Spencer trying to play victim to his new in-laws. Meeting James and his family, who'd probably been told some version of the unstable mother story. Stay calm. Maintain boundaries. Refuse to be drawn into drama. Elena called 3 times offering to attend as support. You don't have to do this alone, Catherine. I know. But I need to. Why? Because showing up alone proves I don't need anyone to validate my existence. I'm there because I choose to be, not because someone's holding my hand. The night before the wedding I couldn't sleep. I laid out my dress, checked my car for gas, made sure I knew the exact route to Riverside Country Club. Then I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I pulled out old photo albums from the box I'd brought when I moved. Pictures of Lily as a baby, chubby-cheeked and grinning. As a toddler with paint in her hair from an art project gone wild. At 7, missing her front teeth, holding up a spelling bee trophy. I let myself feel it. The grief of missing years, the ache of memories that belonged to someone I used to be. The loss of watching my daughter grow into adulthood, of being excluded from college visits and boyfriend introductions and engagement celebrations. I cried for about 20 minutes, then put the photos away. Tomorrow wasn't about reclaiming the past. It was about facing it with dignity intact. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect spring weather. Sunny, warm, the kind of day that made weddings look like magazine spreads. I woke at 6, too anxious to sleep, moving through my morning routine with mechanical precision. Coffee. Toast I couldn't taste. Shower. Careful application of makeup that enhanced without announcing itself. The navy dress that fit perfectly. Modest jewelry. Comfortable but elegant shoes. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who'd survived something that should have destroyed her. Who'd rebuilt from nothing into something solid and real. Good enough. The drive to Riverside Country Club took 40 minutes on highways lined with flowering trees. Nature providing free wedding decorations. I used the time to breathe, to center myself with techniques from yoga classes I'd been taking for years. I reminded myself with each breath, I don't need anything from these people. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Not understanding. I'm attending because Lily is still my daughter, because I refuse to be erased from this milestone, because showing up is more powerful than hiding. The country club appeared like something from a wealth magazine. Marble columns, professionally landscaped grounds, valet parking for luxury vehicles that cost more than my annual salary. I drove past the valet, finding a regular parking spot at the edge of the lot where my 10-year-old sedan wouldn't look quite so out of place. I sat there for 15 minutes watching guests arrive. Women in designer dresses and men in expensive suits. Everyone looking like they belonged to this world of country clubs and destination weddings and trust funds. I didn't belong here. I'd never belonged here even when I was married to Spencer. But I'd built something better. Something real and mine and not dependent on anyone else's approval. I was here because I chose to be. Present. Visible. Undeniable. I checked my reflection one last time in the rearview mirror, grabbed my small purse and opened the car door. Time to remind them what they'd lost when they decided I didn't matter. The country club entrance felt like walking into a different universe. One where wealth whispered instead of shouted, where everything from the doorman's polished shoes to the subtle scent of expensive florals announced that this was a world I'd never quite belonged to. I bypassed the guest book, not wanting to announce my presence more than necessary, and followed the flow of well-dressed strangers toward the ceremony space. The venue opened up like a scene from a bridal magazine. White roses cascading from every surface, silk ribbons the color of champagne, enough candlelight to make the afternoon seem romantic rather than excessive. I found a seat in the back row, close enough to witness but far enough to slip away if things went wrong. Around me, guests chatted in the easy way of people who all knew each other, who all belonged to the same social circles, country clubs, vacation destinations. I recognized no one. Not a single face. 5 years ago I would have known these people. Spencer's colleagues, our neighbors, the parents from Lily's school. But clearly, an entirely new social ecosystem had formed in my absence. These were people from Spencer's post-Catherine life. James's wealthy family. Lily's college friends who'd never met her mother. The evidence of my complete erasure was everywhere I looked. A string quartet began playing, something classical and emotional that I didn't recognize. Guests quieted, stood, turned toward the back entrance. The procession started with bridesmaids in sage green dresses, then groomsmen in perfectly tailored suits, then flower girls scattering petals with varying degrees of cooperation. Then Lily appeared. My breath caught painfully in my chest. She was breathtaking. Not just pretty or lovely, genuinely stunning in a way that momentarily stopped time. The dress looked handcrafted by angels. All delicate lace and precise tailoring that probably cost more than 6 months of my salary. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, her makeup perfect, her smile radiant as she held her father's arm. Spencer looked exactly like what he was. Successful, distinguished, the proud father of the bride. His suit was impeccable, his posture confident, his expression the right mix of joy and bittersweet emotion at giving away his daughter. They started down the aisle together, and I felt the full weight of 5 missing years compress into this single moment. I'd missed so much. College tours and boyfriend introductions. The engagement announcement. Dress shopping and cake tastings and all those mother-daughter moments I'd imagined having someday. They'd taken it all from me. Or I'd lost it. Depending on whose narrative you believed. Then Lily's eyes found mine. The shock on her face was extraordinary. Pure disbelief mixed with something that looked almost like seeing a ghost. Her stride faltered mid-step, disrupting the careful procession rhythm. Her mouth opened slightly, her grip on Spencer's arm tightening. She turned to Spencer, whispered something urgent that I couldn't hear from my distance. Spencer's head turned slightly, following her gaze until his eyes landed on me. That's when I saw it happen. Spencer's hands began to shake. Not a subtle tremor. A visible, uncontrollable shaking that he tried desperately to hide by gripping Lily's arm tighter. His face went pale beneath his tan, his composed expression cracking like fine porcelain under pressure. Several guests in the front rows noticed, exchanging concerned glances and whispered questions. Spencer tried to steady himself, taking a breath and resuming the walk down the aisle, but the shaking continued. He hadn't expected me to actually come. He'd invited me thinking I'd refuse, giving him the moral high ground of, we invited her but she chose not to attend. Or maybe Lily had insisted, and he'd called assuming 5 years of silence meant I'd disappeared completely from her life. But here I was. Present. Composed. Whole. And watching his carefully constructed world tilt slightly off its axis. They reached the altar where James waited, handsome in that generic way of young men from good families, with kind eyes and an expensive haircut. He looked at Lily like she was precious, which counted for something. Spencer released her arm, hands still trembling as he stepped back to his seat in the front row. The officiant began speaking about love and commitment and partnership. Words that should have been beautiful but felt hollow in my mouth after what I'd experienced. I watched the ceremony unfold. The vows, the ring exchange, the reading from Corinthians about love being patient and kind, and felt oddly detached from it all. I wasn't watching Lily and James. I was watching Spencer. He kept glancing back toward my seat, his composure slipping further with each look. His face was a mask of something I was slowly beginning to identify. Fear. Spencer was afraid. Not of me specifically. I posed no physical threat, no legal danger, nothing concrete. He was afraid of what I represented. The woman he'd systematically erased who should have stayed erased. The wife he'd driven away who should have stayed broken and invisible. But here I was, sitting in the back row of his daughter's wedding, wearing a nice dress and calm expression, having rebuilt myself into someone he no longer recognized or controlled. My mere presence was a threat to the narrative he'd spent 5 years building. And in that moment, watching Spencer's facade crack under the weight of confronting what he'd destroyed, I understood something profound. I'd spent 5 years thinking that leaving made me weak. Thinking that I'd failed as a wife and mother by choosing to walk away rather than endure. But I'd been wrong. The real power wasn't in staying and enduring systematic cruelty, trying to fix something that was deliberately broken. The real power was in walking away. In becoming so completely whole without them that your very presence became testimony to their failure. Spencer had tried to erase me and I'd let him think he'd succeeded. Then I'd rebuilt myself so thoroughly that when he finally saw me again, he didn't recognize the woman standing before him. That was power. Quiet, undeniable power. The ceremony concluded with the traditional kiss and the officiant's announcement. I present to you Mr. and Mrs. James Morrison. Guests applauded. The string quartet launched into something joyful. Lily and James walked back down the aisle together, newlyweds glowing with happiness and youth and the confidence of people who'd never been systematically destroyed. As they passed my row, Lily's eyes found mine again. This time the expression was different. Confusion mixed with something that might have been shame. Or maybe anger. Or maybe just the complicated emotion of seeing your mother for the first time in 5 years at your wedding. I nodded once. A simple gesture that encompassed everything I couldn't say aloud. I see you. I came. I was here for your wedding. I'm still your mother even if you've forgotten that. Then they were past me, surrounded by guests offering congratulations and taking photos. As people began moving toward the reception hall, following signs to cocktails and dinner, I stood and quietly walked in the opposite direction, toward the exit. I'd come for the ceremony. That was the commitment I'd made to myself. I had no interest in the reception, in making small talk with strangers who believed whatever story Spencer had told about the unstable mother who'd abandoned her family. I had no interest in pretending I belonged to this world of country clubs and expensive weddings and people who'd watched me be erased without question. I'd done what I came to do. I'd been present. Visible. Undeniable. That was enough. I pushed through the heavy doors into spring afternoon sunshine, the warmth hitting my face like a benediction. As I walked across the parking lot toward my car, I felt something unexpected. Lightness. The weight I'd been carrying for 5 years. The shame, the questions, the wondering if I'd somehow failed, began lifting like fog burned away by sun. I hadn't failed. I'd survived something designed to destroy me. I'd chosen myself when no one else would. And there was no shame in that. I was unlocking my car when I heard footsteps running across pavement. Catherine. Wait. Spencer's voice, breathless and urgent. I turned slowly, deliberately, finding him stopped about 10 feet away. His wedding guest composure was completely shattered. Face pale, tie slightly askew, hands still trembling at his sides. You came, he said, as if stating the obvious would somehow make sense of it. You invited me, I replied calmly. We stood there in the parking lot, two people who'd once promised forever, now strangers with 20 years of complicated history stretched between us like a minefield. I didn't think you actually would, Spencer admitted, his voice cracking slightly. After everything you did to me, you mean? I kept my tone neutral, not angry, just factual. He flinched as if I'd physically struck him. After you systematically erased me from my own life? I continued, each word measured and clear. After you poisoned my relationship with my daughter? After you stole money and destroyed my reputation with carefully constructed lies to her school, to my employer, to anyone who would listen? Which everything are we discussing, Spencer? His face went even paler. Catherine, it wasn't supposed to. Things just got out of hand. I almost laughed. No. Things didn't get out of hand. You planned everything. The ignoring campaign. The financial transfers. The emails painting me as unstable. That wasn't spontaneous cruelty or a marriage falling apart. That was calculated destruction. Spencer's expression shifted, shock that I knew, then something that looked almost like shame, quickly buried beneath defensiveness. Catherine, I held up one hand, stopping him. I don't need your explanation. I don't need your apology. I came today because Lily is still my daughter, and I refuse to be erased from her important moments. But I don't belong to your world anymore. I pulled my car keys from my purse, feeling steadier than I'd felt in years. And honestly, I met his eyes directly. I'm grateful. You showed me exactly what I was worth to you. And it made me realize I was worth so much more to myself. I unlocked my car door, leaving Spencer standing there with whatever words he'd planned to say dying on his lips. As I drove away, I didn't look back. I drove away from Riverside Country Club with steady hands and clear vision, leaving Spencer standing alone in that parking lot with whatever words he'd left unsaid. I didn't look back. Not once. The 40-minute drive home took me through the same flowering trees I'd passed that morning, but everything looked different now. Lighter somehow. The late afternoon sun painted the highway gold, and I drove with my windows down, letting spring air wash through the car. I wasn't processing what had happened with pain or regret. It was more like anthropological curiosity, examining artifacts from a life I used to live, trying to understand how I'd ever believed that version of reality was acceptable. I'd loved Spencer once, built a life with him, believed our partnership mattered, that we were a team facing the world together. Now he was essentially a stranger whose systematic cruelty had accidentally set me free. If he'd been merely neglectful, ordinarily unhappy, I might have stayed forever trying to fix something that was designed to stay broken. But his calculated erasure had been so extreme that leaving became my only survival option. So in a twisted way, I owed him gratitude. I thought about Lily as I drove, My daughter who was now someone else's wife, living a life I knew nothing about. Part of me hoped she'd eventually understand what really happened 5 years ago. That she'd ask questions Spencer couldn't answer comfortably. That she'd want the truth. But I released the need for immediate reconciliation. I'd learned something crucial over 5 years of silence. You can't force people to see what they're not ready to see. You can only live your truth so completely that when they're finally ready, the door remains open. If that day came, I'd be here. If it didn't, I'd survive that too. At Riverside Meadows, the sunset colored my apartment red and gold. I parked my sedan in my usual spot, climbed the stairs I walked every day, and unlocked the door to my small, perfect space. The first thing I did was change into soft clothes. Yoga pants and an old university sweatshirt, the kind of comfort uniform that would have been unthinkable in my old life where I always had to be presentable in case Spencer or Lily needed something. I ordered Thai food from my favorite local restaurant, the one where they knew my usual order and always included extra spring rolls. Then I settled onto my second-hand couch, pulled up the ocean documentary I'd been saving, and let David Attenborough's soothing narration wash over me. My phone buzzed halfway through a segment about blue whales. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. The message was short. Why did you come today? No greeting. No signature. But I knew immediately it was Lily. I stared at those 4 words, reading the accusation underneath. Not, thank you for coming. Not, I'm sorry we haven't talked. Not, can we talk? Just, why did you come today? As if my presence had been an intrusion. A disruption of the carefully constructed narrative where I simply didn't exist anymore. She was angry that I'd shown up. Angry that I'd reminded everyone, her new husband, his family, all those wedding guests, that she had a mother who'd been excluded from her life. I typed several responses and deleted them all. I came because I wanted to see you, to be part of your day even from a distance. Too needy. I came because your father invited me, and I wasn't going to let him control whether I showed up to my own daughter's wedding. Too confrontational. I came because despite everything you're still my daughter and I still love you. True but incomplete. Finally I settled on simplicity. Because you're still my daughter even if you've forgotten I'm still your mother. When you're ready to talk honestly without your father coaching you, I'll be here. I hesitated, then added, I love you, Lily. Always have. Nothing you've done or not done changes that. I sent the message before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone completely. Whatever Lily did with that information was her choice now. I'd said what needed saying. The rest was up to her. I ate my Thai food slowly, savoring the familiar flavors while blue whales glided across my TV screen in their ancient migrations. And somewhere in that quiet evening, watching creatures who'd survived millions of years of change and challenge, I had an unexpected realization. I'd gotten my revenge. Not the revenge I'd fantasized about during those early months at my parents' house, when I'd imagined dramatic confrontations where Spencer apologized and Lily recognized the truth and everyone acknowledged how badly I'd been treated. Actual revenge turned out to be so much subtler. So much more powerful. It was in Spencer's shaking hands when he saw the woman he'd tried to erase, now composed and whole. It was in my ability to walk away from that reception without needing anything from them. No explanation, no closure, no validation. It was in building a life so complete that their approval or understanding became optional rather than essential. The best revenge wasn't destruction. Wasn't confrontation. Wasn't making them hurt the way they'd hurt me. The best revenge was becoming so entirely whole without them that their regret became background noise I didn't need to hear. 5 years ago I'd thought I lost everything when I left. My marriage, my daughter, my home, my identity as wife and mother. But I hadn't lost anything. I'd shed it. Like a snake shedding skin that no longer fit, that was restricting growth, that was slowly suffocating the creature underneath. And what I'd gained was infinitely more valuable. Myself. Not the diminished version Spencer and Lily had created. The woman who made herself small and quiet and convenient. Not the generic store-brand Catherine who fulfilled roles without having substance. The real Catherine. The one who'd laughed at spilled coffee at a conference. Who'd made ridiculous marketing slogans. Who'd believed she deserved to exist fully, loudly, completely. She'd been there all along, just buried under 20 years of systematic diminishment. I finished my dinner, cleaned up the containers, and prepared for bed with the calm routine that had become my anchor over 5 years. Tomorrow was Monday. Team meeting at the library in the morning. We were discussing the summer reading program expansion. Book club Wednesday evening. We were reading a mystery set in Iceland that Joyce had recommended. Yoga class Thursday after work with Elena. Weekend hiking plans with the Phoenix Club, exploring a new trail system 2 hours north. My life wasn't dramatic. It wasn't luxurious. It wouldn't make for impressive social media posts. But it was mine. Genuinely, authentically mine. I'd learned to sleep alone without loneliness, spreading out in my bed without wondering when Spencer would come to bed or whether he'd acknowledge my existence. I ate meals I chose without negotiating preferences or dietary restrictions. I made decisions about my schedule, my finances, my friendships that affected only me. I discovered interests I'd forgotten during my marriage. Marine biology fascinated me now. I'd taken an online course about ocean ecosystems. Pottery remained a hobby despite my complete lack of talent for it. I preferred independent films to blockbusters. Saturday mornings at the farmers market felt like weekly celebration. I had friends who valued my opinion, colleagues who respected my expertise, neighbors who smiled when I passed and asked how I was doing because they genuinely wanted to know. Most importantly, I had myself back. Not the wife Spencer had molded. Not the mother Lily had taken for granted. Just Catherine, full, complicated, interesting, flawed, real. As I turned off my bedroom light, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not the peace of resolution where everything gets neatly wrapped up and forgiven. Not the peace of reconciliation where broken relationships get mended. The peace of knowing I'd survived something designed to destroy me. The peace of walking away from people who treated me like background noise and building a life where my voice mattered. The peace of being systematically erased and choosing to redraw myself stronger and clearer than before. Spencer's hands had shaken today when he saw me. That was his burden to carry. The weight of recognizing what he'd destroyed, what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away in his calculated campaign to erase me. But that wasn't my burden anymore. I'd walked away 5 years ago from a house where I was a ghost. Tonight I walked toward tomorrow, toward my job and my friends and my small apartment and my quiet, genuine life. And that was power enough. The best revenge wasn't destruction. It was freedom. And I was finally, completely free. If this story of quiet strength and walking away had you captivated, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Catherine sat calmly in the back row while Spencer's hands began to shake, realizing she'd survived everything he tried to destroy. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.